Hello and welcome to another video. So today we're going to be taking a look at a canyon sword. At least that's the basic idea, and of course I did spell canyon, not cannon, because I thought canyon was just a little more interesting. But this deck is pretty okay. Certainly not the strongest deck, certainly not the weakest deck, just an okay deck overall. Iron Staff Mechanic and things like that work wonders. Ancient Apparatus is actually quite a fun card to mess around with when you can get it to work. Of course, messing around with that was probably one of the turning points for me with this deck, trying to get it to go off. Everything else is pretty normal. I mean, Jessica Cheerful Cannoneer was an interesting one, not one that I've messed around with, but it definitely has its place. Nicholas, to be expected at this point. Sylvia, again, to be expected. This deck isn't super high cost, which is a huge advantage to it. Only running double Sylvia makes it reasonably cheap and pretty easy to obtain, as Sylvia is in the pre-built deck, so that's definitely a plus. Plus, there isn't too many golds, so with the limited amount of golds that you are running in this deck, it's really quite easy to build. So if you guys are looking for a different experience from Portal, I would recommend giving this at least a shot. So we're going to get right into it and check it out. So I did struggle a bit getting this deck off the ground, but once it was off the ground, it wasn't too bad. It was really just a matter of working out exactly what order to play things and how to play things without going completely overboard, as that was really the only big problem it had. So Ancient Apparatus isn't a bad one. Of course, it does rely on resonance. So when you can play it, if you are going turn 1, you probably want to play it out of resonance. If you're going in a little bit later in the game, you probably want to play it as a non-resonance card. So we start off with the Hamlin duplication, as we weren't going to get any bonus out of the Synthetic Beast Miriam, as it just wasn't going to be viable without resonance active. Whereas now we can actually take advantage of it and get a couple of cards into the deck. Which would have also meant we could have used Ancient Apparatus. I did decide to hold off on using it, as I didn't really want to draw either of those cards because they were quite big. I suppose the Storm would have been okay, but it was really just a decision that I made to not go for it yet. Probably the wrong decision. I think if I had have played it, I could have probably got ahead a bit, but it's just a play. I mean, overall, it's not a big deal. Ancient Apparatus is just one of those cards that you can mess around with pretty easily. So Garuda Storms, not very surprising that that's what they're going with. A Garuda deck, not a huge shock. Go-Go Rombi, and our draw card is going to be a pretty nice solid board. Little Miriam, going to help us out again. And we have got our Crystal Cannon, and an animated one at that, as I do quite enjoy my animated Crystal Cannon. It's always quite a fun card. So a chance at the Nora of History. And just a cannon down, as we do have a Radiant Artifact to use, so why not? We are forcing our opponent to have to answer this as immediately as possible. And they've semi-board locked themselves, at least this turn. No followers on board, we've got our ward set up, we're going to get a fair bit of damage off this. Taking our opponent pretty much from 20 right down. Can't really go wrong with that. Especially when they have now completely board locked themselves. And the next matchup is against Blood. While not a super strong deck in rotation, it did make for at least a reasonable matchup for my Cannon deck here. This Cannon deck was just a bit of fun after all. It was just something a little more interesting to cover, as we can't cover meta decks all the time, and I feel like at this point, until we have a big shake-up, meta decks aren't going to be changing, so we've pretty much covered all of the big changes you could have in the meta decks at the moment with Puppet Portal and different things like that. If you want to check those videos out, you can check out my channel. I do have a whole playlist for rotation and unlimited each, so you can check those out. But overall, this is fairly decent. I mean, you can't go wrong with this hand here. Iron Staff Mechanics are great against Blood, as they are really heavy on the ward end. So one thing I always loved about artifacts, they had a lot of versatility. You're able to go for pretty much any combination, which did give you a fairly good amount of options. And we are going to be able to go for Ancient Squadron off that Ancient Apparatus, as that will let us draw pretty much more Mystic Artifacts, which is exactly what we'd want. We've now stuffed our deck with some more of them, so we should have, I think, 6 in our deck total now. Or maybe 5, I don't know. We have a lot. Either way, we have a lot in our deck. We sent 3, we sent 2, we should have already had 1 left after we pulled one, so yeah, there should have been 6, which is fairly decent. Do go for the Nicholas. We'll have to kill off this 6/5. I mean, it's good that Blood killed themselves down, as it does make our life a little bit easier. And our Mystic Artifacts are really just going to stall them out really well. Especially since it does look like they're adding to be more aggressive, especially with this Dark General. Definitely the push I envisioned. I do go for the Otherworld Rift. May have been a mistake, but I went for it anyway. We are going to be able to go for double Mystic Artifact regardless, so why not? I do wish I had a cannon though. A cannon would make this perfect. But we do have a heap of these Mystic Artifacts now. Way more than we could possibly need. If I had paid attention to that properly, I would have actually played the Sylvia instead there. Small misplay. Not huge. It does give us the draw instead, which still isn't bad. And we can always play Sylvia next turn. I mean, we've got plenty of cards to do that. So, Drinkers, they're really trying to hit us hard here. But hopefully with our wards, we should be able to pretty much hold this off at this point. We're going to have way more than enough wards to really secure ourselves. Well, I could have went for the cannon. The cannon, we would have been fine. I felt like this was just the safer bet. Get as much as I could down while I can. Really make it hard for our opponent to really do anything major. It looks like it was definitely one of the right choices to make, as our opponent is going to have to use a lot of their cards here to remove all this. And we only need 2 damage. Fortunately, we do get the Banishment play. And thanks to the Sylvia we actually played earlier, finding the Jessica lethal was something that I missed initially, but luckily managed to find just as we had enough left to do it. So just a fun little cannon deck to mess around with. Definitely worth giving a shot if you are interested. It's reasonably cheap. I mean, most people have Sylvia anyway. And outside of the Otherworld Rifts, there isn't really anything super expensive that you shouldn't already have. So if you did enjoy this video, hit the like button and subscribe. And you'll find the deck list in the description below. Until next time, see ya.